Hello, and welcome to another review video. This time around, I'll be taking a quick look at the very bloated seasonal, Pad Island. There is a grand total of 54 Pad Island units in this event, with 2 machines that you can roll in with slightly different lineups. The 5 Magic Stone REM includes all 54, while the 7 Magic Stone REM excludes the 5 and 6 star units. There are a few decent and fairly unique units in this event, which mainly goes for all the newly introduced ones, but depending on your box, you might not have much use for these, since most of the notable units can be obtained via bundles, exchanges, or with MP. I would first check the lineup and see whether your box will benefit from rolling here. In this video, I'll try to point out the units that I think are notable, so if I overlook someone, please let me know in the comments below. And if you find this video helpful, please remember to like and subscribe. Before going into the units, let's take a look at the new fishing minigame. You can get a variety of rewards after either waiting 8 hours, or you can speed up the process by using hourglasses. You can get the hourglasses from quest rewards, login stamps, and be exchanged using rainbow tokens. There are basically 3 different fishing spots with different rewards, and you'll only move on to the next one after you have exhausted all of the rewards from each spot. The first 2 spots have a great set of rewards, so make sure to complete at least those before the event is over. The third sheet is not as impressive, and if you for some reason complete it, it will just refresh, then the next spot will be the same as the third and offer the same rewards again. Each time you reel in the prices, you'll get anywhere from 3 to 5 drops from the list. The only exception is when you reel in a free roll, as that will be the only reward. You should be able to complete at least the first 2 sheets without the need of exchanging hourglasses with rainbow tokens. Just try your best to fish twice per day and get all the hourglasses from the quest rewards. For those that want to get all the rewards ASAP by farming tokens to exchange for the hourglasses, you should be farming the Pad Island Advanced Dungeon. On top of getting tokens, there's a 20% chance for a 3k MP unit to drop. So while farming this dungeon, try to stack up as many dungeon boosts as possible. This will be a great chance for a lot of people to recoup MP. You can also get tokens from the new Descended dungeon, though this dungeon is a little bit slower and you should only be farming this dungeon to get Zeroag and his parts. Zeroag is needed for the Sync Awakening of these 3 units, so if you plan to play with them, make sure to farm and fully skill up at least 1 Pad Island Zeroag. There are also gems that can drop on the boss floor, but these only have a 50% chance of dropping, and since they are parts, you'll need at least 5 Power Break Awakenings so that you can guarantee that these drop. You'll be able to exchange 50 of these gems for this 10C equip. This might not look all that amazing for those with deep boxes, especially due to the random haste, but I would at least try to get 1 copy, as even if you don't care for the active skill, the Awakening combination is still fairly solid. Claudia is a Pad Island MP unit, and she plays a very important role in Menuit Chao Lin teams. A system of her will guarantee activatable boards for that team and give you a looping 15 billion cap break, 6x5 board, and a 1.5x HP buff. This unit has access to 2 Power Break Awakenings, which will be needed to guarantee part drops in Menuit Chao Lin teams, since that leader does not boost part drop trait, so for some dungeons, you might even need to stack 10 Power Break Awakenings throughout your whole team. For the time being, a Claudia system hasn't seen much use outside of that water combo team, so if you have no plans of obtaining Menuit Chao Lin, then you could skip on this MP unit. Claudia's first equip is a water version of Rosetta's Keepsake, which might be arguably better if your team mines the Dark Soul Attribute Awakening. The second equip is great for water teams in general, including the Menuit Chao Lin teams, so I could even see some people getting more than 3 Claudias altogether. Both equips can also really shine in Doma teams, so if you're hopeful that we'll get the Demon Slayer rerun, then maybe do consider getting this MP unit. Whatever you decide, do remember that MP is precious, especially nowadays, as every collab or event has solid units that you could purchase for 1 million MP or for $30. But since $30 is a very steep price, buying these units with MP feels a lot more worthwhile. On top of getting the units and their equips, obtaining these will also mean enhancing the badge from whichever collab or event they are from, so this alone might be reason enough to justify the MP purchase. Mito can help tackle attribute absorptions and regular and awoken binds on a very low cooldown, though usually you might go for a double absorption voider, as running a unit that only handles one absorption might not be the optimal choice for most dungeons. This unit can deal okay damage in Wood L teams, but these haven't really caught on. A bunch of units in Pad Island synergize with this playstyle, so if you're rolling a lot in this seasonal, you might end up with a very decent Wood L team that would definitely benefit from having a unit like Mito, especially because the low cooldown Awoken Bind will be necessary since the leaders in the seasonal will need to activate an L Awakening to activate their damage reduction leader skill. Raberiel is an Omnivoider with an active skill that lasts for 1 turn on a 2-turn cooldown. And like always, 1 turn of this effect might not be enough against enemies with super assaults. You could definitely run 2 copies of Raberiel so that you can have 100% uptime on her effects, but your team will be missing out on some damage since you'll be devoting at least 2 team slots to this utility sub. Ra is a really strong rainbow unit that also brings a lot of utility with his triple resist awakenings. Unfortunately, his active skill doesn't do all that much. The foresight effect is often useless, so at best, Ra will only serve as a damage stick that can help recover from board shrinks and is able to destroy a shield on a 3-turn cooldown. If you're really sweaty, you could try to run him as a leader, as his leader skill is extremely strong as long as you can match 5 attributes in only 5 seconds. His equip is great for rainbow teams. This will give you a damage boost and also carry 6 OE awakenings that will definitely help against negative orb skyfalls and will also boost your damage by a little bit. The Fabric Awakening might not be that useful as of now, since rainbow teams don't have an easy time farming parts, but in the future, when Hakure comes to an A, this equip might just be what you're looking for that leader, though probably at most, you'll be fine with one of this unit, since the meta for a while has been about stacking Team HP Awakenings, and unfortunately, this equip doesn't have any. Claudia is a 1-turn cooldown Rainbow Board Maker that can deal a great amount of damage if you're matching across. The unfortunate part is that this unit does not remove locks, so if you have any locks on your board and this is your only orb changer, then the resulting board might not allow you to match 5 attributes, which is basically a death sentence in rainbow teams since you won't be able to activate most leaders' damage reduction. Her equip also has a decent set of awakenings for rainbow units, though again, you might not get much value out of the Fabric Awakening. Base Claudia is a staple in Pat Island Sonia Grand teams due to her damage output and rainbow board active skill. So if you plan to play Sonia Grand teams, you will want to get a hold of this mid-rarity unit. These 2 units could be used on haste teams, but apart from Kurasuno, haste teams are not popular at the moment, and unfortunately, these 2 Pat Island units do not synergize well due to not being dark attribute and physical type. I guess if you don't have Asahi, Panera could work as a replacement if you're fine gaining a bunch of useless Ls and her not doing any damage. Saria could be a replacement for a soft Kageyama, but the biggest drawback will obviously be missing the cap break from that Haikyuu unit. Again, these are not good replacements, and in general, for non-haste teams, the cooldown on these units is a little too long. Kushinare Hime is a utility-focused looping shield. This is one of the few non-transforming, non-Evo active skills units with a 40% looping shield, just like Bartender Minaka. But just like with Bartender Minaka, this unit's 7-turn cooldown might be a little too long for some people's liking, as this can be a big issue in dungeons where you encounter enemies that clear your buffs, like with Pono in the last few EX challenges. This unit's equip has decent bulk and utility awakenings. Those 2 attribute resist awakenings will make team building for Jupiter and Mercury a little bit easier. Toka is an intended leader for all of the recent Wood L units like Kushinare Hime, though the biggest problem is this unit's active skill. Permanent Pierce and unmatchable recovery with a Toka system is nice, but this could have been a strong leader if her active skill created orbs instead of only giving an increased skyfall. With skyfalls, there is no guarantee that the resulting board will have enough orbs for an L match. I do admit that that's very unlikely, but that might still slow you down, as in some turns, you might not deal significant damage. It's also entirely possible that you might not have enough for a wood and water combo, meaning that you won't be able to activate Toka's recovery buff, and this could pose a very big problem in super altitude dungeons. You could add more orb changers to the team, or a looping roulette unit to increase the consistency of Toka teams, though with these problems, it's not that hard to see why Toka never really took off as a leader in JP. This unit is exchangeable for a select number of Pat Island and GFE units, but I would stay away from this exchange as you could use the fodder for better exchanges. These two units are also exchangeable for select the band and GFA units, and I would argue that these are better choices than Toka. Planar is a decent damage-oriented cleric with 4L awakenings, but she might not excel much at damage without a BDP match. Still, since this cleric also handles damage absorption shields, she might not be the worst option for a team even if she can't triple cap. All of her other evos are also decent damage dealers, but I've barely seen them in use. If you don't have a single copy, I might think about the exchange, but I definitely wouldn't prioritize her. Though if you hope we'll get Doma from Demon Slayer, then maybe Planar has a little more value to you, as that leader doesn't really need utility-focused clerics. Also, at the very least, her first equip does see some use in some Doma builds due to its awakenings and active skill. Fujin is a cheaper exchange since she can use 6-star GFEs. Actually, I think this used to be an easier exchange on previous Path Island runs, as more 6-star GFEs and older Path Island units could be used as fodder. However, since her second equip is still really good in the current meta, I would try to obtain one copy if you haven't already. Obviously, due to the cross awakening, this could work on Doma, but even if you ignore that, this equip is still very good. It adds a lot of bulk, it has 4 OEs, and a 3-turn haste active skill. Neptune is a poison leader, and you could build a system with 2 copies of him. His leader skill is pretty bulky, though an issue is that he would really want a high recovery boost to be more viable in super altitude dungeons, due to the fact that you'll be matching the 2 lethal poison combos generated by his active skill. A Neptune system also covers attribute and damage absorption shields, so along with its cap break and origin effects, you should have a lot of flexibility when it comes to the other team members. A big issue with this team will be roulettes though, as these often don't include poison orbs. So if an enemy spawns roulettes, you'll have to react fast after you activate Neptune, because if you lose one, you won't be able to activate Neptune's leader skill damage reduction. Alrisha is another low cooldown water orb generator. However, she doesn't see much use in water combo teams due to the existence of Claudia, who is much easier to obtain than this mid-priority unit. Though if you have $61 lying around, you can buy the team set bundle that comes with 2 Alrishas. You shouldn't get this bundle just for Alrisha. I would argue that this bundle is only good for those that are lacking the fodder to exchange for Menuit and Chao Lin, and also don't have any plans to roll in this RAM. The bundle also gives you a copy of Planar, which as I mentioned is fairly solid, but you could also exchange for that unit with GFEs. The last unit in the bundle is Ryun, who just like Sylvie, grants a looping, targeted attack buff, and a 12 billion cap break to your whole team. These two can be useful for water or wood teams that are lacking cap breaks, so think of teams like Butler Albrechts. Unfortunately, an unconditional 12 billion cap break effect will soon feel outdated, seeing how fast power creep is moving. But that being said, for the time being, Ryun and Sylvie are fairly good options for some non-meta water or wood teams. Metatron is a low cooldown damage-centric cleric. The main highlight is her reincarnated Evo. Her active skill doesn't fully clear unmatchable or awoken binds, and she only clears 8 turns of those debuffs. So before you decide to bring her into a dungeon, you'll have to know if 8 turns will be good enough. In the current meta, low cooldown clerics are in high demand, as some dungeons have almost back-to-back unmatchable and or awoken bind. Metatron sometimes sees use in Menuit and Chao Lin teams. Usually the more popular choice is Path Island Chakeol Madoo, but Metatron might be the way to go in dungeons where you won't mind the low recovery or her 2 Ls. Metatron's fan equip is a low cooldown double absorption voider with a decent set of awakenings. Since it can be easily overcharged, I could definitely see this having some uses if your team can withstand the heal unmatchable debuff. Doma teams immediately come to mind since those rely on auto heal effects and due to the cross on this equip. So this form of Metatron might also be useful in the future even if you don't go for the Menuit and Chao Lin team. Cotton and Linen is an exchangeable duo unit, but this wouldn't be my first priority. Surprisingly, this unit serves as support for Omnimon teams, but that unit's reign as one of the best leaders in the game is long gone. The Omnimon and Cotton and Linen team looks a little something like this, and with this setup, you'll have an activatable board every single turn, though this team's damage output is a little inconsistent, especially because this Path Island unit is used as one of the leaders and it unfortunately cap breaks adjacent allies, meaning that at some point, you'll be missing on up to 60 billion damage. With this pairing, you will also have the same effective HP as you would have with the traditional Omnimon team, which is a little bit surprising, considering that we got this Pat Allen unit over 9 months after Omnimon's introduction, and this duo comes with the same 81% damage reduction. I guess at the very least, Cotton and Linen give you 2 extra recovery boost with their later skill, meaning that at least this team will have an easier time healing in super altitude dungeons. One other glaring problem with this team is the duo's first stage active skill. Maybe we can forgive the fact that this doesn't give you any effective skill boost, since Omnimon himself is not a transforming unit, so you might not need that many skill boosts in the team, but the long-lasting attribute absorption voiding effect might not be enough for the latest endgame dungeons, since again, the team's damage output is inconsistent and not up to par with other meta leaders, so it might take you more than 35 turns to clear a single dungeon, and you'll be pretty much screwed if an enemy absorbs one of your attributes. Sure, this can be bypassed via the attribute absorption latent, but that might not be feasible if the dungeon skill delays you by a lot, and you might not be able to sub in another unit with an attribute voiding active skill, since this team is not all that flexible. Therefore, I would most likely pass on this exchangeable unit, as their equips are also not that interesting. Pagan is a looping shield and piercer, as long as you match rainbow boards every turn. That shouldn't be difficult with any modern rainbow team, though the pierce effect would be useless if you're running 3 made ideals. But other units, like say one with 3 Bartender Alexanders, will definitely benefit from having permanent pierce uptime. Rainbow teams could run the pierce latent to handle void damage shields, but if you expect to encounter large skill delay debuffs, then your team will greatly benefit from running Pagan, since this unit already plays an important role as a looping shield. Pagan's equip has a good mix of damage and utility awakenings, plus the active skill might still be usable in in-game content if you can delay a floor. The gravity attack might not matter much in those dungeons, but I could see this being used for farming. The bad news is that this is not a true gravity attack, so for farming purposes, your team might rather go with the Zeus Avatama if you can meet the skill boost requirements. Again, Sonia Gran synergizes with some of the other rainbow units in this collab, but her teams fail to make a splash in JP. The unit's later skill is a little too demanding. The dragon type requirement isn't really a big deal nowadays, since you could solve that issue via equips, but Sonia Gran's later skill requires you to match 5 attributes plus a cross to activate her damage reduction. If you add in Thorns and Borshniks into the mix, plus any other common dungeon mechanics, then this leader might not have the easiest time tackling the latest in-game dungeons. It also doesn't help that you need 2 Sonia Grans to loop her active skill. If she looped by herself, then maybe these teams would have been a bit more popular. We'll pretty much only have 4 slots to cover other common mechanics. That lack of flexibility is why Claudia is pretty much a staple in Sonia Gran teams, since she is a 1-turn cooldown rainbow board maker. But as I mentioned, the problem with Claudia is that she doesn't unlock. If you notice, Sonia Gran's active skill does remove locks, but you will only have access to that effect every 2 turns. This 10-star unit can be exchanged for most Pat Allen units, but I really wouldn't bother, as she is easily overshadowed by other rainbow leaders who aren't as restrictive or demanding. Do keep in mind that Pat Cafe will rerun sometime very soon, so if you enjoy rainbow teams, maybe set your resources aside for that REM instead of going for the optimal Sonia Gran team, which again is way too demanding. Minerva is a new mid-rarity unit that is a great damage stick for fire TPA teams. The strongest meta team that she could go in is a Gravis team, but unfortunately, these do not have any need for another orb generator. If you activate Minerva after Gravis, you'll end up eating most of your wood orbs, which are needed for Gravis' later skill. Gravis teams will also not benefit from Minerva's cap break effect, and if you want to play with Minerva, then you might want to look into Pat Island Mille, as these 2 units can synergize to make a fire TPA team. But if you have a Minerva on the leader or helper slot, then you will be losing a third of your damage when you activate the Minerva on that position, since she only cap breaks herself and adjacent allies. Minerva's equip is okay if you don't mind the fire sub-attribute awakening, as this equip can bring a much needed levitate awakening to units that lack it to tackle the latest endgame content, and this equip will also grant you 4 effective skill boosts. The lack of bulk awakenings is notable, but if your team doesn't need that bulk, then at the very least, This equip does bring some OE awakenings to the table, which will boost your damage a little bit and can slightly help counter negative or skyfalls. Ruel is a mid-priority unit that deals with damage absorption, shields, and also gives an HP buff. As usual, only handling one absorption void is often not ideal, but Ruel fits in nicely in Ice, Butler Albrecht, and Gravis teams. Ice and Butler Albrecht teams already have a solution against damage void shields and against attribute absorption, either via those units' active skill or via awakenings. And since these two leaders do not override orbs, Ruel's board change can be a lifesaver against boards that will not result in 2 wood combos or a wood BDP match. Including Ruel in a Gravis team will still require a solution against attribute absorptions, but that could be countered via the attribute absorption latent since the team does match at least 2 attributes. Unfortunately, some dungeons might call for more than 2 SDRs, so using that 6 latent slot won't always be possible, and Ruel will be looked over in favor of units that deal with dual absorption shields. Overall, when the circumstances allow, Ruel is a decent damage dealer that can help recover assist or help counter HP debuffs. As I mentioned, there are other Wood L units in this seasonal REM, and these teams will definitely want someone like Ruel. Ganesha is the strongest single target button active in the game so far. Toro used to hold this title, but he has now been power crept since Ganesha's active skill now does 1 more 2.1 billion attack than that Code Geass unit. Having 2 attacks already means that you can deal with regular and super assaults, so Ganesha's 3 attacks might not end up making much of a difference. If an enemy has 6.3 billion HP and no resolves at all, then Ganesha is obviously better, but if you already have a bunch of Toros, you might not gain all that much from chasing Ganesha. There is one glaring difference between these two units, the Dungeon Boost Awakenings, but usually, whenever you're farming dungeons and care about stacking Dungeon Boost Awakenings, then it's pretty much a given that the content you are farming is not all that difficult. Therefore, including Ganesha might feel like overkill. On those dungeons, you might even prefer to include smaller buttons that do mass attacks, since Ganesha won't be able to deal against floors that have more than 4 enemies. Even if a floor has 3 enemies, you'll have to sit through 3 single target attacks from Ganesha. All of that being said, I'm sure that most people, me included, would really want to get multiple copies of this mid-priority unit. Ganesha does have a high damage multiplier if you're able to activate a BDP plus a break, which might be doable if you include 3 New Year Norris somewhere in your team. But honestly, all of that sounds very tedious to try to make Ganesha work as a damage dealer. I do wish that Ganesha had at least 3 Brick Awakenings, since I don't think 2 is gonna cut it even in non-super gravity content. Ganesha's equip is the only other one out there that gives a 3-turn 100% damage reduction effect, and this one is easier to get up and running on turn 1 than Aggregate's equip, which has a 50-turn cooldown. You could put their equip or any other one with 2 skill boosts and a Dungeon Boost Awakening on a full Ganesha team with the Dungeon Boost Super Awakening, and then have a team ready to button on turn 1 with a grand total of 30 Dungeon Boost Awakenings. But since again this is a mid-priority unit, I really wouldn't expect to get multiple Ganeshas without spending a lot of magic stones. Given the extremely crowded lineup, you might also have a very hard time obtaining even 1 copy. Minaka is one of the BGM units, and her base form has now been buffed so that you can use her as a traditional cleric. Before her buff, her active skill would only tackle Awoken Binds, and you will have to rely on the unmatchable recovery latent to deal with those unmatchable debuffs. Now, you won't have to worry about doing all of that setup just for Skyfall to blow up your other TPA matches. Due to her awakenings, she can definitely synergize very well with Butler Kuro teams, and thanks to her active skill cooldown, you could even loop 2 Minakas and 2 Punts, like in this team, to have 100% uptime on the 2x HP buff and also on the 45% damage reduction shield. The team is obviously not very flexible, but it can get very tanky. I do wish that Minaka had at least 4 heal OEs on her base awakenings so that her healing can be significantly boosted, as 4 heal OEs at most with the super awakening might not really cut it in super altitude dungeons. Her first 2 equips are pretty solid, especially when it comes to awakenings. The first one has a great amount of bulk along with 3 effective skill boosts. The second one is a bit more situational though, as the water sub-attribute awakening might not be desired and the active skill on it can also be easily overcharged. though the Fortune cooldown on the equip could allow you to forego bringing in a cleric if those debuffs are rare or spaced out throughout the dungeon. Dark Minaka is an amazing damage and heal stick, and can play the role of a dual absorption voider. Since her active skill also gives a large shield and a board expansion, her cooldown had to suffer. Therefore, with a 7-turn cooldown, Minaka might not be your first choice if you expect multiple absorption shields one after another. There are cases where she can really shine, like in SN5 against the Dragon Knight trio, where Minaka's active skill will help tank their first arranged hit, and also with the wood, light, and dark attribute absorption for 2 turns, which is also significant since this enemy has a super assault. Her dark equip also has the same active skill as the dark base, which might not be that useful turn 1 of most dungeons, but as with other somewhat low cooldown equips, this could be overcharged later in the dungeon to deal with an absorption and or to tank large hits. Even though all of her forms are of some use, I am not too sure if at this point in time Minaka is worth the $30. Her first 3 forms only really shine in TPA teams, and if you don't have Butler Kuro, you might not really have much use for this unit. Her Dark Evo and Equip definitely have more uses, but again, the 7-turn cooldown might be a little too high, or you might not be a fan of her overriding a looping shield. Isis and Nephthys is the badge unit of the REM, so if you're interested in a team consisting of mostly Bad Island units, I would recommend getting this unit if you haven't already on previous runs. The base unit is a solid cleric, though your team will probably want another unit with more heal OEs if you'll be matching heal orbs, as 2 heal OEs alone won't be enough, especially in newer dungeons. Apart from that issue, Isis and Nephthys do have a lot of utility with all of their shape awakenings that can help recover assist, reduce sticky blind skyfalls, and slightly reduce damage with the hard L. Their long cooldown active skill does mean that you could put any equip on them and it won't overcharge, which could be very handy as it'll help you patch holes in your team with equips that do have great awakenings but horrible active skills. The second stage active skill gives you a cleric effect plus a 75% damage reduction shield, which maybe you won't be a fan of since this will interrupt any looping shields. Depending on the dungeon and your team, having any downtime on your looping shield means certain death. So this duo might be overlooked in favor of other clerics that won't interrupt any shield effects. However, in some dungeons, this type of active skill will feel tailor-made, like in the upcoming Venus title. In that dungeon, there are a handful of large hits that are preceded by an awoken bind or an unmatchable debuff. The rest of the enemies there do not hit as hard, so some teams can go without a looping shield and only run a unit like this to handle those enemies with large hits. Both of the duo's equips are also very solid and might justify the exchange even if you don't have an interest in the base. The first one immediately screams Doma, but outside of those teams, this equip can be very useful due to its effective skill boost and the rest of the awakenings. The second equip can be used in parts farming teams like Rosetta's, especially due to the Dark Sub-attribute awakening. Outside of this unit's forms, you might still want to get this unit if you are interested in Menuit and Chao Lin teams, as these will greatly benefit from the Pat Island badge. Though if you never rolled in Pat Island before and don't buy any bundles, then amassing enough fodder for this badge unit and Menuit and Chao Lin will be a very pricey endeavor. Mille is the orb skin unit of the event and is therefore purchasable for $20. On paper, this unit could definitely work as a leader, but unfortunately, playing and team building for this leader might not be the easiest endeavor. This is one of the rare hard cross leaders in the game, and going for that shape means giving up at least one hard TPA or a hard L, and at least those 2 shapes have corresponding awakenings that help out the whole team when it comes to damage reduction or healing. The usual orb gen unit for the team is Pat Allen Minerva, who does generate enough orbs for that heal cross and the 2 fire combos that you'll need to activate Mille's leader skill. Unfortunately, Minerva's active skill does not override orbs, so if you're giving a bad board with too many heals or fire, you might not be able to activate this orb skin's leader skill. So even though Mille is an extremely tanky leader, playing her sounds like a pain, especially since she doesn't give you any FUA and will be therefore required to pair with Pat Allen Minerva, which will mean less consistent damage since Minerva cap breaks adjacent units, and will also call for more power break awakenings since Minerva also doesn't boost parts drop rates. So again, I feel like you could forget about running Mille as a leader, but if your team can't fit her, this is a pretty strong sub as her active skill gives you Omnivoid and Cleric effects. So this unit basically condenses 3 roles into 1 unit, though the 6-turn cooldown might be a little high for a lot of dungeons, so you would still either want to run at least some other cleric or absorption voider in your team. Mille is more commonly run as a sub in Gravis teams, as that team gladly welcomes the Paprika Awakenings and usually has a free slot. Mille is a pretty amazing fit since she is also physical type, and her cleric effect will come pretty handy in dungeons with back-to-back, awoken, or unmatchable debuffs, which are basically deadly for a leader like Gravis, whose leader skill needs certain awakenings to be activated. Her equip is really solid, as it does come with 6 effective skill boosts, 3 team HPs, a jammer assist, and 4 OEs. In addition, you also get 4 turns of Pierce and a cleric effect, which might be very handy at the start of a dungeon. This is overall a very solid equip, but I don't think that this alone is worth the $20. Therefore, I would only look into the Mille bundle if you have a Gravis team. Menuit Chao Lin is exchangeable for 20 select Pat Allen units, but you could also get 2 copies of her via the $61 team set bundle. I'm not sure if a lot of people will be buying that bundle, but if you want to assemble the Menuit Chao Lin team, you can pretty much get the whole team and 3 million MP for $61, and you can add $30 for the commonly used last sub, Chakeol Madoo. I don't know if anyone will actually spend the $91 for this team, but that's definitely a thing you could do if you want to avoid the REM altogether. This duo unit is a damage dealer with an interesting Evo active skill. With 2 units in the team, you can have 100% uptime on all of her effects, with the occasional shield destruction and single target 30% gravity. At the start of the dungeon, you will have to use the first stage active skill, charge up the second stage, and then use the other duo units first stage while using the other units second stage. This should be relatively easy to accomplish with haste and delay equips. So with 2 of this unit and 3 Claudia subs, you'll have almost all important roles covered. The only thing missing from the team now will be a cleric, who ideally should also have a shield effect. And that cleric should also ideally have L awakenings to help recover assist. A very common unit for this role is Chakeol Madoo, the new BGM unit from the event. And even though you might think that this is a weird choice, since Chakeol Madoo do not have a single water ping, this is basically the way to go, since Menuit Chao Lin's leader skill calls for 2 water combos, meaning that you'll have to match L's with the wood, light, or dark orbs from Claudia's orb gen. As you can see, this team is not very flexible, as pretty much the only somewhat flexible team slot is for the cleric, who again also has a bunch of requirements that they need to check. And depending on the dungeon, this team might not have the easiest time with back-to-back awoken or unmatchable debuffs. Chakeol Madoo's cooldown is about average nowadays, but some dungeons basically have those debuffs very soon after another, and it'll be pretty hard to stall with this team since the orb generation needed to activate the damage reduction from this duo's leader skill is also tied to your cap breaker. Another option for the cleric role that might be better suited for those type of dungeons is Pat Allen Metatron, though with that unit you'll be missing out on a looping shield effect, which for a lot of endgame content like EX challenges is basically a hard ask. Overall, this team is really strong, but maybe too pricey to assemble. Chakeol Madoo is the new BGM duo unit. As I mentioned, this cleric has a mix of utility and damage awakenings, though to fully cap on their third attribute, you'll probably need to match wood L's. On top of the cleric effects, their active skill also gives a looping shield effect, but like always, these type of active skills are a bit awkward to time, so if you don't know the dungeon well enough, you might face a few problems. That does pretty much mean death for the new leaders that need to activate certain awakenings to activate their damage reduction. I already went over how this unit is used with Menuit Chao Lin teams, but this is also a very common sub for Gravis teams, which also commonly use Pat Allen Mille. Having these 2 units in the team does mean more outs to awoken binds, which again are very deadly for leaders like Gravis. And at least with the redundancy in active skills from these 2 bundle units, you will pretty much be able to freely use Chakeol Madoo as just a looping shield. That is, if you're not expected to use a cleric back-to-back. This duo unit's active skill also creates 5 nail orbs, but I don't think that this effect will be all that consequential for most teams. For those unaware, each nail orb match essentially gives a FUA equal to 1% of an enemy's max HP. I guess I could see this come in handy for leaders with low FUA to deal with problematic super resolves, but you shouldn't really be facing that issue if you're playing any modern leader. So if you plan to use the active skill for the nail orbs to deal with a problematic super resolve, you may have some trouble timing that. I guess you could try to save nail orbs. However, Skyfall might screw you over and match those away, or an enemy could mess up your board with hazard orbs or with the board refresh. Chakeol Madoo's first equip is amazing for most bar farming teams. Obviously, the active skill won't be all that good for the first turn of most dungeons. Most people mainly use this on transforming units or those with long cooldown Evo active skills, since the mix of bulk, utility, and damage are pretty rare at the moment. The second equip does lack the bulk, but this one is a little bit more useful on turn 1 due to the haste active skill. Again, this is a BGM unit, and given how bloated the machines are, it might not be the worst idea to get this unit since the base is really strong, and the equips are also pretty handy, especially the first one for those that care about parts farming. Basically, every unit worth getting in Pad Island can be bought with money or MP, and this time around, all bundles except for the team set will be purchasable twice during the duration of this seasonal event. I would say that the Chakeol Madoo bundle has the most value due to their base and equips. A cleric with a looping shield, decent damage, and utility fits in nicely in Gravis and Menuit Chao Lin teams. Menuit Chao Lin can also be obtained via bundle, but if you've been playing for a while, you might have enough to exchange for her with 20 select Pad Island units. I would only purchase or exchange for this duo if you're willing to shell out the 3 million MP needed for 3 copies of Claudia, as outside of those teams, Menuit and Chao Lin don't really see much use. Again, that typical team looks like this. It has great damage output and does a decent job at farming parts, but the team does lack flexibility when it comes to the last sub or unit replacements. Throughout the whole event, you'll be able to buy 2 out of the 3 needed Claudias for the team via bundle. I still think that $30 bundle is not really worth it, but this might be an option for those that really want to play the team or are very low on MP. Hopefully that's not the case, and you can get at least one Claudia, as her equips are pretty strong and will be useful in future teams like Domas. The Mille bundle might be worth a look if you have Gravis, but if you don't, then this orb skin unit might not help your monster box all that much. Fire CPA units are not in high demand, but since Mille's active skill does pack a lot of useful effects, she might be worth bringing along in teams, preferably where she can deal some damage. I am skeptical of there being that many non-Gravis teams out there where you'll want Mille, and therefore would only buy this bundle if you think that the equip is worth the $20. Isis and Nephthys can be exchanged for, and if you have any interest in the Menuit and Chao Lin team, then you pretty much have to get this unit to run the optimal builds with the Pad Island badge. This is yet another unit that you can get with money, which basically means that you can get all but one unit in the team for the low price of $181 plus tax. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend that. I would try to get most of the units here via MP or via exchange if possible. Minaka is an old BGM unit, and while I do think she has some value, I would not prioritize her bundle as not that many teams can make good use of her in the current meta. When it comes to other exchangeable units, I might take a look at Fujin and maybe Planar. Fujin's fan is a great equip that adds a good amount of bulk, utility, and effective skill boost. Planar is a slightly more expensive exchange, but the base can be a good cleric option for water teams. Plus her Yukata can be useful for Doma teams. There are some unique REM-only units, but the chances of getting them are very low, so I would caution you about chasing them. Apart from Metatron, I would say that only the newly introduced units are of some use, though for some, that might still be a stretch. I would consider everything not on the screen to be a purge candidate. It's a good rule of thumb to not completely get rid of copies of a unit, but sometimes sacrifices need to be made if you're short on magic stones. You could even get rid of some of these if you don't see yourself playing Rainbow Cross or Wood L teams, for example. So do your due diligence and see what works with your monster box. One of the most coveted mid-priority units is Ganesha due to his dungeon boost and button active skill, but good luck getting multiple of him without going broke. Apart from farming, his button active skill might come in handy in ranking dungeons. I haven't seen him being used so far in JP, but that might change in the near future. At the end of the day, I would rather save up for future events and avoid rolling in Pad Island as much as possible, especially if you're not after the Menuit and Chao Lin team, as those other future REMs have comparatively stronger teams or have a way less bloated lineup. Pad Cafe will return very soon and will most likely overlap with the second half of Pad Island. That in-house will bring back Made Ideal and Butler Kuro, who are still highly rated leaders. If you didn't complete those themes, or have changed your mind and want to pursue them, then you might not want to spend stones in Pad Island so that you can roll in that other 10 Magic Stone RAM. After Pad Cafe, we may see the highly anticipated Demon Slayer rerun. This collab will have a handful of meta teams that are accessible since a lot of key units can be obtained via exchange. The most notable leader from this run is Doma, who some consider to be the strongest leader in the game, but also happens to be REM only. 2 of his popular subs are new and thankfully exchangeable units that will require 10 Demon Slayer units as fodder. And if you're not swimming in fodder from previous runs, then you will have to pull a lot in that 7 Magic Stone RAM. Maybe after Pad Cafe, and possibly while Demon Slayer is ongoing, we might see a Halloween rerun. We don't have any details yet, as JP and NA get that seasonal relatively at the same time, so nobody can really say for sure if you should set aside that many stones for this event. Usually Halloween is one of the better seasonals, so maybe budget some stones just in case. After, we'll see yet another Gung-Ho collab rerun. This one is a bit of a snooze fest, and if NA happens to miss out on the Demon Slayer rerun, then a lot of the notable units from that Gung-Ho collab rerun won't really have a home. The Kaiju number 8 collab is about to start in JP, and this one introduces units with some of the brand new awakenings that were introduced in the latest version. It's a little too soon to tell how impactful this new collab will be, but maybe the novelty of the new awakenings is enough reason for you to set stones aside. However, since this is a brand new collab, we have no idea whether this will make it to NA. After the JJK rerun debacle, we now don't even know for sure if reruns like Demon Slayer are guaranteed to come to NA. Anyways, what are your plans for Pad Island and for the foreseeable future? Let me know in the comments below. Also, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I'll probably do a multi on the 5 Magic Stone Pad Island machine to see if I get lucky with Chakeol and Madoo or Mille, since I do have a Gravis team that could make use of these units. I am pretty low on stones at the moment, so I am trying to save a few stones by avoiding the 7 stone machine. The rates on the latter machine are marginally better than the 5 stone machine, and while it does cut off some of the lower rarities, the lineup still has way too many outdated units. For example, I don't think going to 1.2% from 0.8% for Chakeol and Madoo is worth the extra 2 magic stones. Again, let me know your thoughts and plans in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and a special thanks go out to Anokor Panda, Pat Brostek, Breastfeeding Obama, Dark Silencers, Dingo Dante, Eddie Ryan, Exen, and Wave for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.